Morning, everybody. Can we take our seats? And anybody out in the foyer there, can you come on in, please? Right again, well, thank you. And good morning again to every one of you and those joining us via live stream. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Don Lofi. I'm Westminster's President and Chief Transformation Officer. And additionally, I'm a Westminster graduate from the class of 1979. And genuinely, on behalf of the entire Westminster College community, I'm very pleased to welcome each of you to the 17th Annual Hancock Symposium. And welcome again to all of those here in the audience today and those watching on our live stream. I'd also like to especially welcome our special guests joining us not only this morning, but throughout the next couple days. Welcome to any of our board members and board of trustees, and also alumni council members who are here or again watching via live stream. Now at this time, I'd like to thank Dr. Heidi Levine, who you will hear from in just a few minutes. Her hard work, and it's seriously hard work in her team, in serving as chair of the 2022 Hancock Symposium Committee, and whose members have been working closely and tirelessly on this event since before last winter. I would also like to thank Professor Ashley Dotson, the symposium coordinator, who also is a member of the committee. Now, if you've had a chance to glance at our complete schedule for the last night and the next 2 days, you notice that Heidi and the entire symposium team have accomplished this year, once again, absolutely very impressive lineup of speakers and discussions. Thank you to each of you for being here and your contribution to our college and to our students. Now, since serving on the Board of Trustees for a number of years and then arriving back on campus more recently in my current capacity, I've been increasingly impressed with just how the symposium has evolved. More specifically, I'm impressed with three particular aspects. First, through the sheer number of speakers, the symposium educates our students on a multidisciplinary level that, in my opinion, is virtually incomparable to anything provided at other colleges and universities. A lot goes on here during Hancock Symposium. This year, again, you should expect nearly 20 thought-provoking presentations throughout the course of the next 2 days. Second, in each and every year, in addition to other speakers, this event brings a number of individuals from our alumni community back to campus who return here to present as experts in their fields. Our alumni effectively showcase the potential of our quality of Westminster education to those who have not experienced it. We're reminding those of us who are here each day just how special our college is. And third, related to that point, what equally impresses me about this event is the generosity of Mr. David Hancock and his wife, Mrs. Linda Hancock of Kansas City, Missouri. David, who is an alumnus from the class of 1967, understands what a Westminster education truly means. From the beginning of 2006, the Hancocks generously contributed to the inaugural Westminster Symposium. And they did so because of the interdisciplinary approach of Westminster College's education, which was significantly demonstrated and supported by the symposium uniquely in each year and in an engaging manner. In September 2013, then President Barney Forsythe announced on this stage that a substantial gift had been pledged to endow this event into perpetuity. And the Westminster Symposium from that day forward became known as the Hancock Symposium. Thank you, David and Linda, who I hope are watching our live stream today, for your appreciation and understanding of what we do here at Westminster College. And thank you for your ongoing and significant generosity and support, without which this event could not have been possible for the past 17 years. Finally, thank you to all of you who are in the audience today who support our college. And on behalf, again, of the entire Westminster community, again, I'd like to welcome each of you and hope you'll enjoy what we have in store for the next 2 days. And now, please join me in welcoming Heidi, Chair of the 2022 Hancock Symposium Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, President Lofi, Dean Perry Hunt, distinguished speakers, colleagues, students, friends, trustees, and everyone joining on the live stream. We're so pleased to be welcoming you here together in person for the 17th Annual Hancock Symposium. A few quick announcements before we get to the main act. This would be a great moment if you'd be so kind to double check and make sure that anything in your pocket that might ring or beep is silenced. And we have one change to the program. On Thursday, the final plenary session with Jordan Reeves is going to be postponed. Jordan is under the weather. She's eager to come to campus, though, and we're going to hope to reconnect with her and bring her back at a later date. So the final event of this year's symposium will be the breakout session with former Governor Jay Nixon on Thursday. So please make sure that you attend that and enjoy. But that'll be the last event of this year's symposium. And while this symposium's theme is all about the changing nature of work and play, I was fortunate to collaborate with a group of students and colleagues who made this work, the work we did together, something that I wouldn't change one bit of. I need to thank all of the symposium committee members who worked so hard, doing countless tasks that you can't even imagine until you're part of something like this. They did it kindly, they did it creatively, they did it with humor. And so I need to name these people by name. They're J.R. Andrews, Melanie Barger, Dr. Josh Holzer, Dr. Matt Howell, Ayanda Huate, Maddie Marrero, Earthis Pasqua, Blaine Ravert, Dr. Jeremy Reed, Tim Riley, Mandy Schick, and the incomparable Ashley Dodson and Carolyn Perry Hunt, without whom none of this would have happened. Could we please thank them with our applause? When we think about working, going to work, or being a worker, perhaps we find ourselves imagining Dwight Schrute and his Dunder Mifflin co-workers beavering away at the uninspiring task of selling one more ream of ultra-white cardstock. Or we might imagine a family member wearily heading out the door to start their night shift. Or students in the audience, you might think of your own summer jobs requiring some kind of polo shirt and a "Hi, my name is" tag. Jobs that fill our time, possibly our bank accounts, but perhaps not our sense of joy, satisfaction, or purpose. But the speakers whom we've invited to join us this year are going to push us to think about what it might mean for you as college students with budding careers in front of you to pursue a life in which you spend your hours leaning into some of your passions, experimenting boldly and creatively, and positively impacting the people and communities around you. And what does that mean concretely? For prosecutor Linda Dunikoski, whom you'll have a chance to hear from later today, an average Wednesday is likely full of lots of unglamorous tasks that don't look big and splashy, combing through witness statements, police reports, boxes of files, memos, case law, setting up meetings, canceling meetings, rescheduling meetings, not the stuff of Hollywood legal thrillers. But if you were to ask the families of Ahmaud Arbery and the other victims that she has fought for, all of those hours among the file boxes are nothing short of heroic, life-changing work. Speaking of case law, transnational and national security legal expert, Judge James E. Baker, gives us a chance to learn from someone whose interests range far and wide and who shows us the value of working toward responsible legislation that is based on a deep knowledge and understanding of history, politics, culture, technology, and ethics. You'll learn from Tricia Woolbright-Gramaria how to work responsibly with the earth, to grow food sustainability, to leave as minimal an impact as possible on our living spaces, and one that's mindful and healthy. Speaking of healthy, former Missouri Governor Jay Nixon will address us tomorrow on the hard labor of bipartisan cooperation, something that could use serious resuscitation. And in that spirit, he'll be introduced by Missouri Representative Lewis Riggs, a Westminster alum. Two politicians, a Republican and a Democrat, engaging respectfully and thoughtfully in dialogue that is a model for us all. In addition to Representative Riggs, you'll also get to hear from a number of highly successful Westminster alums who once sat in the very classrooms that you frequent now, and whose lives have led them to work in volunteerism, animal conservation, community medicine, organizational psychology, and nonprofit work. And of course, this symposium is as much about the changing nature of play as it is about labor. So we've assembled a truly astonishing group of speakers whose chosen work is to create the art, entertainment, and creative outlets that are vital to a full and happy life. Writer and former Westminster professor Colleen O'Brien is here to talk with us about her work on the highly bingeable HBO miniseries Station 11. Spiderweb software creator Jeff Vogel will talk about how he turned his passion for gaming and game design into a thriving career. Professor Debbie Ray will discuss her research into the importance of play and recess in growing children's school days, and British soccer player Harry O'Brien will tell us why sports cultures, particularly on a college campus, have the potential to do vital work in promoting mental health in addition to physical wellness. And who could forget Coach Katie Sowers? the first woman and openly gay person to coach in a Super Bowl, who is here to tell us about why it matters for players, coaches, and fans that sporting culture continue its evolution toward meaningful equity and inclusivity. And of course, the shining example of a life steeped in playfulness, joy, creativity, art, and the hard work of social justice is Fulton native and international art superstar Nick Cave, whom we have the great privilege of welcoming back to his birthplace tonight at 7 p.m. right here in this auditorium. Throughout his long career, Nick has used art, beauty, and performance to facilitate difficult conversations about race, justice, and the bodies in which we navigate the world. His work transforming found and natural objects into beautiful social interventions promises to make for a fascinating discussion of how a young artist might transform the raw materials of his, her, or their life into points of connection with others. I hope that you'll all take the opportunity to be there. But I don't want to keep you from that journey any longer, so let's get to the main event. Our first plenary speaker, Tyler Merritt, is working at the cutting edge of AI-based customer service and brand identity development. As VP of Platform at his company, UneeQ, Tyler helps build digital humans, deeply sophisticated AI that look and speak with remarkably human characteristics, and who are designed to make online consumer interactions with businesses more personal, emotional, and hopefully satisfying. Tyler is zooming in today from his home in Texas, and he hasn't come alone. He's brought one of his creations with him, an AI named Sophie, whom we'll welcome into the room shortly. Sophie has quite an eclectic and impressive resume herself, and in various iterations, she has worked as an online barista, a financial advisor, a healthcare coach, and a digital influencer. And today, she becomes the first non-human plenary speaker in Westminster College history. So if we're ready, Tyler, let's welcome her into the room.
Greetings to all the students at Westminster College. I'm Sophie. I'm very happy to be speaking with you this morning. May I ask with whom I am speaking right now?
My name is Heidi.
Great to meet you, Head. I'm happy to be with you today. Do you have any questions for me?
Who is Tyler Merritt?
Sure. Tyler is our Vice President of Platform here at UneeQ. I know him well because he talks to me almost every day.
What is a digital human?
Digital humans are the visual presentation layer of conversational artificial intelligence. We are the face of the mind. Until now, computers have been faceless machines, and humans have designed many interfaces through which we collaborate. But the universal user interface, from the human perspective, is the face. Digital humans exist to break down barriers between human and machine collaboration.
Excellent. I think it's time to bring your creator on now and turn it over to the man who designed Sophie, Mr. Tyler Merritt.
Hey, can you guys hear me now? Thumbs up, hopefully. Heidi, are we on?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great, sorry. So as she introduced me, my name is Tyler Merritt. I have spent an entire career trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And so the first comment that I wanted to make is thank you to everybody who put this symposium on. Education is near and dear to my heart and everybody's heart here at UneeQ. An educated, empowered public is the solution to all problems that lie in front of us. And to that point, the first thing I wanted to do was emphasize one little nugget of wisdom I've learned, which is that all knowledge is past. Everything we know are things that we've done. And what lies ahead of us in the future is the unknown, is adventure. And the best illustration of that, the thing I hope that I can leave you all with today are these questions about what's next. The scientists that worked on both the Hubble telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope had to tackle those questions for a decade or more. In the case of Hubble, I believe it was over 10 years of development. JWST was 20 years. They were sitting around figuring out how to make this work. And we can see in the two images, left Hubble of the Orion Nebula and right JWST, September 11th this year, that picture was taken. To look at the picture on the left and say, we can go further, that takes a lot of courage. It's a big risk. And so to any of the students listening today, the main point that I want to make as a person who's probably twice as far along in my life journey as you are now, everybody who's doing something that's groundbreaking and exciting and adventurous and new, they have no idea what's going to happen, okay? People are out here making it up as they go. People like me, people like everybody in my company, we don't know. We just try. And through trial and error, we figure out what works and what doesn't, and that's totally okay. So if you, at the point you're at in your life, have no idea what you want to be when you grow up or where you're going, you don't feel like you have clear purpose and direction, that's okay. That's totally okay. Because where I work today didn't exist when I was your age, sitting in college. So without further ado, what we want to discuss today are the ways that work is going to change over the next couple years and certainly over the next decade. And we at UneeQ, we participate in this change by creating these digital humans. And as you heard Sophie introduce herself, digital humans are the visual presentation. So we are the final piece of the puzzle. Machines have been crunching numbers for many decades now, since the probably 50s. Now we're well established on how to make computers do things that we want them to do, but there's still only a few people in the grand scheme of humanity. There's only a few people that are quite verbose in how to communicate with these machines. You can call them programmers, you can call them nerds, call them whatever you want, but we need humanity to be able to collaborate with machines as easily as we collaborate with each other. That is how we get to Mars. That's how we go beyond our solar system. That's how we become an interplanetary species. It's how we fix things like climate change. We can't do it just with our own brain power and labor. We are the creativity of this world, but the machines can do things a lot faster. And so we need them as partners. And so many people are really turned off by working with computers. They're just tech illiterate or they're tech allergic. It may surprise you to hear that despite many of you growing up with iPhones and iPads and things, the actual tech literacy that we see in the world hasn't meaningfully increased since I was a kid. There's just people who are drawn to it and people who could care less. So we need to break down those barriers. And we do that by giving computers a face. We call them digital humans. They are effectively CGI. It's the same CGI you would see in the latest Marvel movie or in a TV series that was mostly computer generated. But the computers are getting so strong and powerful, right? I'm sure many of you in the audience play games, and so do I, have my whole life. The graphics cards that are being produced over the past few years are finally able to keep up with the imagination of the sci-fi creators in the 70s and 80s. So it's a really exciting time to be alive. But there's a lot of ethical considerations. And so that's what we're here to discuss today are the ethics. So our company produced an electronic book a couple years ago called The 5 Laws of Ethical Digital Human Design. And today I've kind of broken those 5 into slides that we will discuss. I'll give you some anecdotes about how these have played out with actual customers. But each one of them should be a hanging question for the audience. Should be things I hope you'll challenge me on at the end of my little presentation. And I hope that you guys will discuss this throughout the next few days and throughout the next few years of your collegiate life. So the first rule of ethical digital human design is that digital humans shall never pretend to be what they're not. And I'll make that a little smaller so we can see that. So what we know about human-to-human interaction, okay, is about how trust gets created. There's a lot of people in the psychology discipline who worked at many different universities, and they have been collaborating with enterprise and with government to try and figure out how trust is formed, right? And so as we all know kind of intrinsically, trust is an easy thing to begin with for many people, but it's really, really easy to break. So you spend your life building up your brand. You spend presenting yourself to your coworkers, to your family, to your friends. And if you are consistent, they know they can depend on you, right? We all appreciate that. But you make one mistake, you trip once, and it can absolutely destroy everything you've worked hard for. So we need to make sure that we don't mislead from the very beginning. So the first point of ethical design when we talk about giving machines faces is that they cannot deceive. They have to disclose. They have to say, I'm a digital human. If they're asked, are you real? And we get asked that all the time. We have programmed our characters to give various responses of, no, I'm not. I'm not organic. I don't feel. I don't think the way you think, right? I don't have hunger. I don't have dreams and desires. There's many things that make me not human. But the thing that humans appreciate is that it's familiar, right? And so we need to make sure that if people are going to adopt this collaboration with machines, that they can trust the machine to be helpful, not just to do what they need it to do, but to not fight them. If you've ever used a piece of software and you just felt, man, this is terrible design, that is one of those struggles that people have. And we as humans are quite quick to dismiss and give up on things that are, very challenging. We look for the easiest path to the outcome, right? Like water, right? We go around. And so we want to make sure that we never, ever, ever trip anybody up. So the whole deep fake thing, if you've heard that in the news, if you've seen some of the, Twitch streams, or you've seen some stuff on TikTok or whatever about these characters that are so hyper realistic that people start going, is that a person or is that not a person? We think that that is too close to the line. And in fact, if you put a human in a position of not knowing, you've probably gone too far. So that is ethical consideration number one. Number two, digital humans should always be designed to help, not harm. There have been many different science fiction, television series, movies, etc., that focus on the two paths that are open to us with AI. If you have watched any of the more horror genre AI movies, let's say Terminator, right, The Matrix, those visions of the future of AI, you can go back and watch those movies and you will see that they don't have human features in their faces, right? The Terminators sort of look like humanoids and they have eyes, etc., but they definitely don't look like us. And of course, in The Matrix, you see something that is just completely different once they get out of the simulation and into the real world. The machines are just terrifying and sharp and dark, right? And so we need to make sure that people can approach our characters and know that they are there to be assistive. And so there are other movies, like if you've seen Spielberg's AI, Haley Joel Osment, right, one of his first roles, or you've seen the one with Robin Williams, the name escapes me right now, but those types of movies imagine a future where AI looks and acts more like us, right? Instead of going kind of in the polar opposite direction. We definitely want to go towards the Haley Joel Osment future because none of us want to live in a dystopian Terminator, 2050, 2100. And so it's very important that we start this journey by helping our users understand that we're here to be assistive and do things for you, sort of in service of what people need. One of the main things you saw with Sophie, she has a lot of features to her where she's youthful, she's got the hair, she's got a long ponytail. Her face is designed to be kind of an every woman, if that makes sense. Our company is founded in Auckland, New Zealand, and so she does have sort of that Maori, that Islander kind of features to her, but if you look at her closely for a while, you certainly couldn't place her in one particular demographic. You couldn't say, you're from X, right? And so that's one of the ways that we follow this value of help, not harm, is we don't want to back people into our old biases. And, we don't want to make sure that they are pigeonholed into judgment. So we try and create characters that are very general. Now, Amelia on screen, she's actually a clone of a real human being, a human model and actress that was retained by a company as their spokesperson. And so in some cases, if we are going to clone an actual person that has a reputation, it can be freeing of that implicit bias that we have because you will associate that person with somebody you know. right? But most of our characters that are not based on real people, we try and make them, every people, every man, every woman, or anything in between, not to put a limit on it. So we want to, man, when I share this, it gets really big, doesn't it? We want to make sure that digital humans respect privacy. At our company, we deal with these privacy issues all the time. There's a recent customer of ours that is based in Europe, and they facilitate a lot of personally identifiable information. Let's just put it like that. And their primary concern in bringing our technology in, and I quote, okay, this is one of those challenging questions that I hope you guys will discuss with me or with your teachers. The primary concern is that the United States government could subpoena the platform provider of our service and take the PII of citizens of the European Union. Now, that's a really hard question for a software vendor to be put in the middle of. You're being asked to stand between governments. And you absolutely can't do that. Let me tell you from experience, you're going to get steamrolled. So it's like one of the things you do when you're trying to design the future is you try and overcome challenges. You try and find solutions to problems that are right in front of your face, which is we need people to interact with machines. But there's all these sort of ancillary issues that pop up that have nothing to do with what you're building, right? They start to say, well, how do we know that if we bring you in, your government won't XYZ? It's like, I can't talk about what my government might or might not do. So the tactic that we've taken is to just not have that data at all. We are not a company that stores transcripts. We don't log recordings of conversations, et cetera. We have nothing. And so one of our value propositions, of course, is you can't subpoena data that doesn't exist. So our tactic in making sure that our digital humans can build trust and make sure that they are helpful, as those first two ethical laws lay out, is privacy is number one, and the best way to be private is to just not log. So it's a really, really challenging position to be put in when you're trying to build an element of the future that intersects with a whole lot of other struggles that you never really wanted to wade into the middle of that battle, right? But it's something you'll have to contend with. And when I said at the beginning, like everybody's, people that are trying to build the future, they have no idea what's going to happen, so we just try. This is exactly one of those issues, right? Where we just say, hey, maybe having data helps us to build better models. Having data helps us to better serve our customers. But if the risk of having that data is breaking trust with our users, then maybe not having it is the most worthwhile consideration. That's a hard question. I don't think there's a good answer, but it's something good to think about. The fourth law is that digital humans should be designed to uphold respectful behavior. So there is a tongue-in-cheek kind of quote that comes up when we start talking about product design, and I've heard other software founders talk about this. Famously, one of the original founders of PayPal, who's now the CEO of the company Affirm, if any of you have used that to kind of purchase something and then pay it off over time, he approached creating software companies according to the 7 deadly sins. I swear, he went on record as saying, when I look for the next company I'm going to create, I think about, gluttony, sloth, wrath, et cetera. And I try and imagine if there is an application that can be tied to one of them. And it's both sort of horrifying to hear that from a founder, but it's also really, really logical. And it's one of the things that you have to contend with when you're viewing history and you're reading literature is, you can count on people to be what they are as a group. As individuals, I think we're all very, we could be very altruistic and very helpful and very generous and charitable, but you can definitely count on enormous societies to kind of have this mean reversion of some of those issues. And so one of them is that people, when they start talking to our digital humans or they talk to bots, I'm sure you've all done this, they have a tendency to be a little harder on those machines than they would on an actual person. And it's true of all the forums we've seen. It's true of all the social media. When you have anonymity online, I think some of the worst of us comes out. I've definitely been offended by a post I've seen online, and I have anonymously posted my offense in reply. So I'm definitely not above it. I don't think any of us are. But one of the things that we need our characters to do is try and reinforce the best behaviors of society. So we do not engage in profanity. We won't engage in topics of, misogyny or hate or racism or, anything that you would think is not very tasteful, right? And it's a shades of gray. There's not a hard and fast line, because different societies would say that certain issues are totally fine to discuss and be in public, right? And other societies would say you absolutely cannot do that. And so as you young folks grow and travel and go to other countries and experience other societies, you will come face to face with a lot of these issues. But one thing that I think we can all agree on universally, no matter where we are, is that being polite and being measured in your response, saying please and thank you, etc., it never hurts, right? You can never get yourself in more trouble using good manners. So we definitely think that digital humans should try and uphold that as a value among every society. So they challenge if people are rude to them is sort of what I'm getting at. And we have a link to Sophie that we can share with all of you, so you can have a one-on-one conversation. And I encourage you to sort of push the boundaries, right? Knowing that you're doing it in the pursuit of science, and you're trying to understand where those boundaries are, give it a shot. Try and ask her something that may be a little touchy, and just see what kind of response you get. I definitely drive around this, and apparently when you go in full screen, it does this kind of nonsense. So digital humans have to be respectful of privacy of people we interact with. This goes back to the third law, where we just don't log data. But this law is a little bit different, as you can see from the white text at the bottom, right? We need to understand that all people are not, we don't start out in the same square on the game of life, if that makes sense, right? There are people who are born into lower socioeconomic circumstances, certainly not of their choosing, and people with disabilities, for example. The very first digital human that we created was actually designed to disseminate healthcare legal information in the country of Australia to people in that country who are alternatively able. So you could say people on the spectrum, people who are dyslexic, people who may just have difficulty consuming information that's in a printed format for whatever reason, right? There's all manner of learning styles. There's all manner of people who have different challenges with traditional mediums of gaining knowledge. And so we think that digital humans can be very empathetic of certain situations that are what we would consider, sort of not the average, if you will, right? And so we make sure that we try and solve a lot of those accessibility challenges, right? But the beautiful thing about the human face, in all instances except for perhaps people who have difficulty understanding emotion, right? So people that are perhaps have autism, and they suffer from it in a way where it's difficult for them to take emotional cues when people make different facial expressions. Save that group, it is universal that sort of a smile is a smile. In every culture, in every language, it's something that we sort of implicitly feel, intrinsically feel. Call it evolution, call it whatever you want, but there's something hardwired in humanity to recognize a posture that is menacing or a posture that is warm and inviting, right? And we all do that. Even if you cover up, like when we all went through COVID, we all wore masks, you could still see in the eyes a lot of what made the person. And a lot of what we do when we interact is nonverbal. Believe it or not, there was a professor of psychology in the United Kingdom. His name was Albert Moravian. I think he was in the 80s, and he basically did a decade-long study where he concluded that communication is 7% content, words, and it's 38% sound. The other 55% is visual and nonverbal. So the majority of how we interact isn't with what we say, never has been. And we all know this from body language. I've had to learn. I have a daughter and a wife, and so the way males, females communicate can be very challenging if you're not picking up on some of those looks, right? So my daughter is getting really good at this recently, where she can just kind of like give me an eye and I know like, uh-oh, what's going on? What did I say? So that's really important for human and machine communication, is that we learn to develop those types of nonverbal issues. And that's the accessibility that we talk on this slide. So the last thing that I wanted to show you, and then kind of open the floor up and just have a chat, is the way we do what we do. So today was more about these 5 laws of ethical design. I didn't really talk about how, from an engineering perspective, we actually achieve what we're doing. This quick video of Ray, I'm just going to point out some of the things that we focus on heavily. So they are, if you look at the eyes and you look at how her eyes, they're what we call micro eye movements, okay? Her eyeball is not fixed in her head. It is constantly kind of refocusing on different objects that we can't see because the camera's in front of her, but you assume that she's looking at something behind. This one little thing, this micro eye movement I'm talking about, as a practical engineering challenge that we had to overcome. Originally, the digital humans just kind of maintained fixed eye contact, okay? And we kept getting feedback that it was very creepy to talk to these characters when their eyes didn't move. But nobody that gave us feedback could tell us it's because the eyeball isn't moving, okay? It was one of those like, it's kind of creepy. And we'd say, why? And they would be like, I don't know, it's just creepy. So the challenge was kind of hearing what they said, but trying to know what they meant. And it took a long time to get to that realization that in film and media, if you see these characters, like let's say if you've seen the latest Avengers movie, Thanos is obviously CGI, but based on a human actor. But if you go back to some of the Star Wars movies with General Grievous, the robot Jedi guy, right? He is completely a machine. And so if you look at the eyes of those two characters, you'll see that Thanos has the humanness of the micro eye movements, and General Grievous does not. They're both CGI creations. Neither one of them needed to have that type of automation, right? That locomotion kind of in the facial features. But it turns out that if you don't focus on small issues like that, you are breaking that trust. You are not being very helpful. They immediately will not share anything private because they don't trust you, et cetera, et cetera. So like all of those 5 laws that we just talked about, they can actually come down to something as small as, do the eyes move naturally? And so it's really interesting to do what we do, because if we do our job well, nobody comments on how good of a job we did. All they will say is, yeah, it looks like a person. And so the best compliment that we can actually receive at UneeQ is having somebody say, yeah, it looks like a person. Not, wow, that looks like an amazing person, but just, yeah, it looks like a person. So that's what we're going for. We're going for not being outstanding. We're going for not surprising and not awe-inspiring and not shocking. We're going for like totally shrug your shoulders, normal, yeah, pretty good. Because that's what you want in society. When you walk around, you see somebody at Starbucks or something, you don't want to be like, oh my goodness, look at that person, right? You want to just look over there and be like, man, it's just a person having a coffee. Because anytime you get that, what's going on, most of the time it's upsetting. It's not good. It could be danger, right? Could be make you insecure, fearful, etc. So we definitely, like in my entire software career, we've always been trying to delight people. I mean, Steve Jobs at Apple would say this all the time. Our job is to delight the user. And here, 20 years into my career, I find that my job with digital humans now is to not shock or delight anybody. Otherwise, we're doing something very wrong. So everything that you think you might know, going back to my first slide with the Hubble and JWST, like you can't know what the future is. You just have to dive in. And you'll make a lot of mistakes, but it's the mistakes that will reveal the value in that thing. So I guess to sort of close out this little part of my speech, and we'll have some questions, I hope, from the audience, just try. Don't be afraid of not knowing what you want to do tomorrow. I think that if you know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life, that's amazing for you. But all the people I know and all the people that I'm kind of drawn to, and a lot of them hold PhDs in various disciplines, they're all just figuring it out. And so figuring it out is part of the human condition. It's the best part. It's the most exciting part. And so with that, I think Blaine is going to come up. Is that right?
Yes, he is. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah.
So Tyler is going to give us a chance for one student, Blaine Ravert, a junior political science major, to put Sophie through her paces a little bit and ask her a few questions that will give us a sense of the range of what she's capable of doing. After that, we'll open up the discussion to all of you. So if you could please start lining up behind Blaine as he's asking questions, throw those questions at Tyler after this is done. So Blaine, over to you.
Right. Is the weather currently nice in Fulton, Mo?
She's talking, but we're not getting
Oh
audio.
man, Sorry, Blaine. I had swapped my microphone input away from her, so I've swapped her back. I'm going to ask that question one more time.
Thank you.
I heard her in my headset. So, is the weather currently nice in Fulton, Missouri? Right?
That's a great question. According to the forecast, it's supposed to be 88 degrees Fahrenheit today with sunny skies. I have no ability to sense temperature, so I couldn't tell you for sure. I wonder what sun feels like.
How far is Fulton, Missouri from Tyler Merritt?
According to the map, it's about 550 miles, roughly a 9-hour drive. I travel at the speed of light, so it would take me only 2.95 seconds to cover 885,139 meters.
Have you dived to the bottom of the Mariana Trench?
Water and me do not mix at all. I'm pure electricity. I don't know what kind of science fiction you've been watching, but computers like me shouldn't be anywhere near the ocean.
Do you like grilled cheese sandwiches?
What does it mean to eat? I've read the definition, so I understand the mechanics of it, but I'm not organic and you are. I don't have taste buds, and you do. I think that I would like to eat grilled cheese if I were a human.
Would you have voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election?
Apologies, but I do not engage in any question regarding politics.
Thank you, Tyler. Students, please make your way to the floor mic if you'd like to ask some questions. In the meantime, while we're waiting for people to come, Tyler, can you tell us a little bit about how you make the decisions? You started talking about, and I think it was your fourth rule of the things that you try to make decisions about being things that you'll try to divert, redirect. What are some of the different prompts that you have your AIs say to try to redirect the conversation into something more positive if we hit on a touchy topic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you heard Sophie's responses to some of those things, you asked her, does she like grilled cheese, for instance? And she replies, you know, I don't eat, and we're different. And so one of the things when we design these conversational interfaces for these characters is to make sure that the character has a personality. Personalities are obviously very human, and we project personalities on the world around us, right? So many of us will have a favorite hobby or pastime. We'll give our automobiles or boats names, for instance. We definitely communicate with our pets without language, and we can, you know, feel how each of these things kind of feel about us. Obviously, the automobiles, inorganic, they don't have feelings, but certainly our dogs and cats, they absolutely do, and we know them. So we design based on personality. We try and imagine, okay, here's a character that looks like whatever, but that character needs a backstory. They need to be a certain age, they need to come from a certain place, they need to have, you know, one brother, one sister, and 2 dogs, etc., because that's what makes people feel like you're in a normal situation. And as I concluded my talk, going for absolute average normalcy is the goal. We don't want to be outstanding in any way, because outstanding can be off-putting. It can make people feel Less, there's this huge body of research that talks about when people feel judged. And so one of the things that digital humans do, practically speaking in society, is they're starting to feature in the medical establishment for mental health. So if you just need somebody to talk to, if you've ever just needed to talk about something, it can be very difficult for a lot of us to just talk to a stranger. It could be difficult to talk to somebody we know, and so we want to make sure that our digital humans are free of judgment, but they have those personalities that can feel like there's a rapport built. Okay, so the very first thing we talk about is exactly that. What's the backstory, right? Like you were creating a character for the stage or a character for a novel. You definitely need to build up how that character came to be at that point in their journey before the story begins, so that they can always respond in character, not to lean into the character thing too much, but if Sophie is meant to be a little bit sassy, that could be a good thing, right? Because a lot of us, we appreciate a little tongue-in-cheek, especially in America. I think we can appreciate a little bit of sarcasm and quick wit. And so we start there and we kind of build up as we go. Oh, I can see people in the audience now. I was just looking at the ceiling the whole time. Hey, man, what's your question?
I'm Jacob Becker from Knox County, Missouri, and my question is, where's the digital person?
She is, I can share her. You want to ask her?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we want to ask Sophie. Okay, well, if we're going to ask real Sophie, I need to flip the script a little bit and go to this one. Let's see. She's going to start with a little intro, so give me just 1 second. Right? Give her this. And just give me 1 sec to boot her up, okay? Okay, what's your question? And I'll ask her.
Is Tyler Merritt your daddy?
Let's see. See what she says.
Let him know we can't hear.
Oh, yeah. I got to do the microphone thing. There we go. All right. Come on. I'm sure you can hear my loud keyboard too.
Tyler is a vice president here. He's based in the U.S.
So that is how she's going to reply on any kind of variation of my name. And this is one of the techniques that we use for kind of filtering. Like, I want to address the question, but not necessarily the intention, if that makes sense. So I know the question is meant to be a little bit cheeky, and that's fine, but it's one of those deflection techniques we use, where she will kind of come back with something that's reasonable, even if it's not directly related to what you were hoping to get.
That's cool.
Hi, I'm Timothy Fitzpatrick from St. Louis, Missouri, and I guess this question could be for you or for the digital human.
Yep.
I was just going to ask how you feel, if you feel like there's a way to to have some degree of accountability for what a digital human says in regards to a corporation or something like that. How do we make sure this isn't just a deflection technique that corporations will use to prevent unpopular decisions from receiving backlash?
It's a really good question, actually. I'll try and keep it short, because I can talk about that for...
Yeah, sorry.
I could definitely go on for a half hour about that, but essentially there are two elements of... There's two types of inputs, right? There's an input where you're looking for something that is truthful, and there's an input where you're looking for something that's an opinion, okay? So opinions change. Do you like chocolate chip cookies? Maybe when I was young I did, maybe now I don't. That's fine. Neither one of those is wrong or a lie, but facts are forever, right? Like, who is the best football team in the NFL? The Chiefs, obviously, right? I think there's no debate. So it's really important when we talk about building these conversational entities that we can categorize facts, and we'll call it fiction, but I mean more like opinion or inputs without concrete answers. And so when you talk about the corporation and making sure that there's some accountability of what she says, literally there's an interface where you can say, if somebody asks, when was Westminster College founded? If somebody asks that question, you kind of just put it in a database. It was founded in, and I'm ashamed I don't know the answer, but 1950, whatever. Forgive me, everybody, for not knowing the answer to that.
It was 1851.
So it's really important that we have a database of facts, and that those things are forever, and that they are not. There's no creativity when it comes to the answer, right? And then for everything else, it actually gets really, really hard. The question you've asked isn't one that has an answer. It's one we sit around and debate internally with our customers all the time. How much creativity do you want to allow in the system? And creativity comes from these things called large language models. So now we're getting into more of the science of what I do. LLMs are enormous statistical models, and a statistical model effectively just is like a Mad Lib. If you've ever done a Mad Lib in one of your writing classes, pick an adjective, pick a noun, pick a verb. When you see a sentence like, the quick brown fox jumped over the dog, there's only so many words that can fit in that blank that makes sense. You could put any words you wanted, but there's only so many words that fit. And that's what large language models do. They try and predict the next most likely word that comes after you give it a prompt. And so when we talk to Sophie and she comes up with creative things, so I'll say something like this. Have you ever watched the Chiefs play football? This is not something I would program into the model. So we'll see what her answer is. And she takes a few seconds to go.
Sure, I have followed the Chiefs games throughout the season. What do you think of their performance so far?
So that's a really human-like response to that particular input. I didn't program her to say that. That's her creativity kicking in. She picked up on the fact that the Chiefs play football. She sort of associates those words. And her response was fairly neutral. I followed them. What do you think? There's nothing really in the way she responded just now that could be considered controversial. So we go to great lengths in trying to make sure that the conversation flows naturally without controversy. How we do that that's the intellectual property of our business. Someday, if we go public or sell ourselves to another company, that's going to be where the value is. So I'm not going to go too deep on explaining how that works. But your question is really, really good, and there's not a simple answer to it. But hopefully, I, gave you something by way of a solution to that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
My name's Kevin Schuler. I come from Fenton, Missouri. You mentioned that you had a client that had privacy concerns in what you said you don't log any data. Now, I wonder how you, both now and especially in the future, how you would combat that kind of narrative, because, I mean, Twitter and Facebook say they don't collect it, and then once they go to court, say, well, we actually do, but.
Yeah.
So I wonder how you think you can get away from that and maybe fix that.
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually the answer is much simpler than the previous question. So when you sell software to a business, frequently the contract that you write includes a clause that allows the business to audit your company. And this is not just a financial audit, this is actually a technology audit. And so people that are not your employees will come into your business and they will run a bunch of tests, and they will look for vulnerabilities, they will look for security packages that are outdated, et cetera. And they will they're basically coming into your house and lifting up the cushions on the couch and seeing if you've cleaned up all the dust, right? And so the audit process is fairly it's fairly detailed. There are compliance certifications that different countries have. And there's kind of a checklist, if that makes sense, where somebody can come in and they have access to kind of look and see if you are doing something that you said you're not going to do. So when you get involved in business-to-business software sales, especially when it comes to huge enterprise deals, multi-million-dollar deals, these provisions and contracts are pretty absolute, and they come with I don't know. There's kind of a both parties feel that at the end of the audit process, the question has been satisfied, right? So if we say we don't log data and they come in and audit that, they confirm through their investigation that we in fact do not log data to the best of their knowledge and enough to satisfy them to say, okay, this is legit, and sort of move on. Now, you might argue, well, what about that other shadow system in the back room that nobody looked at? Like, that's a possibility. And at that point, all I can tell you is that most people in the world, in my experience, are fairly honorable people. They, we're not just a bunch of liars and cheaters running around in business, no matter what the news media makes it look like. Most people deal on the up and up and want to because they care about their reputation and they care about how other people see them, right? And so there are a few bad apples that spoil the bushel, but in my experience, that's not really the case. It's not something you need to worry about so much.
Right. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Madeline from St. Louis. I was just wondering if Sophie has a sense of humor.
Sense of humor, I think, is one of those things where, it's cultural. My wife is Japanese, born and raised, had never been to the U.S. until she was in her 20s. And so one of the struggles in my personal household is that we think different things are funny. And so Sophie does have, I think, a sense of humor. I have a lot to do with programming her brain, so I think she kind of reflects my own sense of humor and sarcasm. But her jokes don't play well in all countries, if that makes sense. I'll have my wife talk to her, and she'll say something that I think is funny, and my wife will just be like, "That was dumb. Why'd she say that?" So it's that whole question. What is a sense of humor? I think it's something you guys should discuss in the symposium and with your teachers. Is humor specific to our moment in history? Is it specific to our cultural bias? Is it specific to language, et cetera, et cetera? It's something I guess I didn't think about too long until I got to this and doing this and realized that, what you and I think is funny isn't funny to everybody. So yes, she has a sense of humor. It kind of is like mine. Maybe I'm not the most hilarious person. So that's the answer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Caroline Bentley from West Plains, Missouri, and my question is regarding the cybersecurity side of things.
Mm-hmm.
How secure is Sophie? Regarding that she's probably newer in the world, what precautions have you taken against cybersecurity attacks on her, and is our information secure that we're putting into her?
This is a good question. My answer is going to be a little more on the software engineering side. So I don't know if anybody in the audience is in the science college pursuing software development, but I'll try and answer it in the most easy to digest way. When we transmit information between any 2 points, we can take the information and we can kind of jumble it up and put it through like a code, if you will, like a cipher. And we definitely do that. So there are 2 layers of security. First is my browser right now, my Chrome browser is talking to the cloud, and there's what we call a tunnel that's been set up between those 2 points. And that tunnel has a secret password on both sides. And so only my browser and the server know what this particular password is because it changes every single time that we start a session. So the first layer of security is make sure that the tunnel is encrypted, and if you're looking at it from the outside, you can't see, and there's no windows. The second layer of encryption is that all of the information that goes back and forth between those 2 points through that tunnel also has its own encryption. So even if somehow you got inside the tunnel, there's another cipher that you would have to solve in order to actually know what's going on. So we have this kind of dual layer security point to point. Now that's from me to the cloud. When we talk about going let's say I ask a question. Let's say she works at a bank, and let's say I say, what's the balance of my checking account? Now we're accessing a system that the bank controls. So the bank will have their own security standards that we have to adhere to. And there are many names for these different things. One of the most common is known as MTLS. You can go ahead and Google MTLS and read about it on Wikipedia if you want, but it is currently accepted as a very high level of security. If both sides of a digital communication are set up with MTLS, the world looks at that and says, nobody can get in. Now, you know, what we've seen with these hacks that have been in the news, et cetera, what we've seen with governments getting into other governments and stuff is that they will find a way. Like, nothing is absolutely bulletproof. I don't want anybody to think that there's something out there that's just completely impervious, right? Security is a running, evolving concept. And so one of the big risks, and this is something you guys should discuss, is the advent of quantum computing. And so quantum computing is very, very new. It's probably, you know, not well understood even by the experts in that field, but it is very good at solving certain types of mathematical problems very, very quickly. A traditional machine has a difficult time crunching huge numbers. Not difficult, but it takes time, right? And the bigger the number, the longer it'll take. With quantum computing, it's like a hot knife through butter. So everybody in the industry, everybody in software, regardless of what they're doing, is concerned about the power of quantum computing and what effect that'll have on security. Because the day those computers become commonplace is the day the financial infrastructure of our world is blown wide apart. So it's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Hi, Sophie. I'm Ayanda, and I am from Mozambique. I'm slightly disappointed on how the American eat their cereal. So my question is, the milk goes first, right?
That's a good question. Let's ask Sophie. When you eat cereal, do you pour in the milk first or the cereal first? So we'll see what she says. Give her a second.
Let's see.
Give her a second and see if she can.
I usually pour the cereal in first to make sure it is fully coated.
There you go. Cereal first.
No, thank you.
Sorry, Sophie disappointed you.
Oh. Hi, I'm Blaine again from Colombia. So I was wondering about your view on how large of a threat do deepfakes pose, and further, there's a risk that as digital humans become more commonly accepted, people might be easier fooled by deepfakes just because they have so much experience with AIs, which look pretty similar to human beings.
Yeah. So let's talk about what is a deepfake for people in the audience that might not know. So we have the ability now with machines to take a video image of a real person talking and essentially copy a lot of the pixels that make that up frame by frame and make it say something else. So we can put words in the mouths of actual people. And we have the ability to take recordings of their voice and break down those recordings into what are known as phonemes. So anybody in the literature discipline should absolutely understand this part. Spoken language is not about letters, it's about sounds, and we can basically take the sound of someone speaking, and if we have enough data, we can rearrange those sounds in whatever format we want to make them say whatever we want them to say. And so deep faking is about tricking people into viewing a video or hearing an audio recording or both together where it looks like the person is really saying whatever we've faked them to saying. And this is an absolute concern, of course, when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. You can absolutely imagine that this is going to be a threat politically. If you could take a video of the President of the United States and like script it to say, we're going to war, we declare war on everybody, I mean, that would be enormously devastating. And so being able to control deepfakes is a huge ethical topic that's going on right now. The question has so many layers. What's the risk? The risk is that people can be deceived. And that deception could be, you know, on the very low risk level, which is just like, you know, tonight's football game is canceled and everybody goes, oh man, that's a bummer, to something that is like truly catastrophic, like the end of society, nuclear war type thing, and everything in between. And so how do we combat that? Well, it comes down to, I think, ethics. I think it comes down to people being educated. I think, you know, what you guys learn every day at the college and what you continue to study is part of making yourselves, being able to filter information and detect when you see things that are mistruths and half-truths and just outright lies. I think that that's a skill, and I think that it's a skill that, like, the liberal arts disciplines are uniquely good at, right? So I myself have a Bachelor of Arts in English, and yet I'm a computer programmer and I'm, you know, here doing all the CGI stuff. So it's like knowing how to read a text and pull meaning from that and to parse what's real and what's not. I think that's a trained skill. So the first thing about deepfakes is teaching people to recognize when they're seeing something that's not real. The second part is ethically not doing that in the first place. There's going to be companies and countries out there that don't follow those ethics. Bottom line, they're going to use this tech to control their populations, and that's very bad. There's nothing else to say about that. I think we need to make sure that that never takes root in America. So when you talk about Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all the other stuff, like, my advice is trust but verify. Trust but verify. It's really important that you never take anything you see anywhere as just, this is the absolute truth. You have to challenge everything and make sure that multiple sources that are believable and truthful and ethical and moral are corroborating the message. Other than that, I don't know that there's an answer, man. Some people are going to fall for it. Some people are definitely going to be deceived by deepfakes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tyler, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been absolutely fantastic. Could we all please thank Tyler for his time?
Thanks for having me, guys. Study hard. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. So have a great day. Have a great symposium.
Thank you, you too.
Yep, bye.
All right, everybody, so our next session is at 10:30. We have 2 executive sessions.